Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. I'm excited to announce that I'm launching 2 new courses. Both courses will begin January 9th, and registration is now open on our website. You can go to the Leader U tab and click on Masterclasses, and then you will see the options of emotional intelligence and self-leadership. In each of those tabs, you can learn more about each of those courses, what they will cover, what the expectations are, frequently asked questions, as well as what's the benefit to you and what's the benefit to your employer. I would love to have you join me on this journey. I look forward to enhancing and creating a life that you love in 2024. I hope to be a part of that. If you have any questions, send us an email at info@blackriverpm.com. Thank you for joining us on the Leader U podcast. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Ryan Berman. He has more than 20 years in the courageous idea space and an intimate understanding of the intricacies of emotional storytelling for the purposes of driving courageous change. Ryan, a practitioner and authority on the subject, has had his methods featured in Entrepreneur, Fast Company, and Forbes. In addition to giving talks at Google, Snapchat, and Charity Water, Ryan speaks all over the country to C-suite marketing and professional service audiences on the topic. He covers the learnings found in his book, Return on Courage, a business playbook for change. Living in San Diego, California, Ryan has the good fortune of creating stories for household brands such as Caesars Entertainment, Johnson & Johnson, Kraft, Heinz, Major League Baseball, Puma, Qualcomm, and Subway. He's been featured on a panoply of podcasts, including Adam Markle's New Pivot podcast, Brian Kramer's H2H podcast, Awesome at Your Job podcast, and Rhett Power. Ryan also has his own courage brand called Sock Problems, an altruistic sock company that strives to sock world problems with socks. Finally, Ryan launched a Courage Bootcamp and has an 8-week online course helping companies galvanize their staff and pinpoint their best talent. I am so excited to have you today, Ryan. Thank you for joining me.
Oh yeah, wow, that guy sounds interesting. I want to meet that guy. I mean, jeez. Let me let the listener know. I didn't have to read all that. I know you do it on your end, but if I were gonna give myself a shorter bio, I would say observationalist, dad, husband, um, clarity expert. I'd probably leave it at that.
I love it.
Storyteller's probably in there too. That's
That's awesome.
definitely in there too. But the fancy bio, it's a funny thing, and I know why you do it, and you have to do it, and it's all just been a journey, and you go from one opportunity to the next, and next thing you know, you have a bio that takes 27 minutes to read, and this concludes the podcast. So my apologies to the listener.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. So let's talk about the journey. Like where did you start out and how did you arrive doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I never in a million years thought this is what I would be doing. I think I have to go back to 14-year-old version of Ryan Berman, like little thin Ryan Berman with hair. And I'm on the beach in right outside of Maryland. There's a beach in Bethany Beach. And we had always gone to the beach with a family from New York. And I think at this particular moment in time, I was probably imitating some sportscaster or something I had seen on TV. And I remember my friend's parents going, "Oh my gosh, Ryan, you're so funny. Like you should go to television radio school at Ithaca College." And I'm like, wait a minute. You can study television radio? I'm an expert in television. I've been watching television my whole life. Like, tell me more. And the irony is I ended up, 7, 8 years later, going to school, television radio major at Ithaca College. And I think that was the first place where I really learned story. And while I was there, I don't think they were called guidance counselors, but my advisor, he reminded me of Papa Smurf. He was an amazing man. His name was Howard Kogan. He is actually responsible for Ithaca is Gorgeous, this famous T-shirt that kind of plays in the Northeast. And Howard's like, have you ever thought about advertising? Because he's like, you're quick-witted and you're clever, and you should at least explore some classes. And he was talking about this class that 3 years down the line that he teaches that maybe I should take. And I don't think he was just like trying to opt in kids. I think he really saw something in
Mm-hmm.
me. And, you fast forward and I come out of school with, taking all these classes in advertising. And I loved just the idea of how creativity and business came together. Make a long story short, I ended up going to New York City. I was part of a 700-person creative agency. Started on one side of the brain. Didn't get my first choice, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Then got moved over into the creative side and got to travel around the country shooting commercials when that really mattered. The way I've always been wired is like laser focus on a goal. If it takes 1,000 days, so what?
Mm-hmm.
Get there, and then it's like, okay, cool, I did it. Now what? What's the next goal? And so my only goal at that time in my life in New York City, and I mean, I had no responsibility. There was no family. Yeah, there's no kids. It was just me trying to survive New York City, this awesome sort of breeding ground for creativity, was to get into the creative department. And
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of stuff you saw on TV. Some of this I'm slightly embarrassed of now. I did a lot of the subway work. Yes, I did a lot of the Subway Jared campaign. No, I had no idea about this guy, obviously, but it gave me confidence that I could tell storytelling at the highest level. The now what was then longer form story structure. I took night classes for movies, and really what they taught me was how stories come to life and like the different acts and what happens to the main character and what the main character needs to be successful. And if
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go spend, back then it was $10, now $20 to go to the movies, you better in the first 5 minutes give me a real good reason to root for the protagonist. If I'm going to hunker down and give 2 hours of my life, I better love this protagonist because I'm going to go along on the journey. And you learned about the differences between Act One and Act Two and Act Three, which is sort of metaphorical of how you and I know each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Modern Elder Academy, because it's looking at a new act, it's looking at an act break, and what do you do in that next life? So uh, it gives me the courage to move to California. I actually chose San Diego because I knew a couple there that were my friends
Mm-hmm.
from the city, and I thought I was going to be inspired by the beach and write movies and go to LA. And never in a million years thought that I would become an entrepreneur. But I moved on September 11th, 2004. You're going to remember that date, although it was a different September
Mm-hmm.
11th. And by October 11th, I had started my first creative agency with the strategist, the woman who I'd moved in with. And we started as four people out of a house. The idea of writing movies was backburnered, and it was like, oh shoot, I'm doing this. I mean, I took television radio classes, not business classes.
Mm-hmm.
So it then became how do I do this? And now I describe it as like, what got me through it was fear, stubbornness, willingness, and probably a little bit of talent, right? If you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to pull this off. And I'd say over the course of about, gosh, from '04 to basically 15, I filled out the business bingo card. There was a merge, there was a buyout, there was a acquisition offer. Um, and then I eventually, got bought out in 2017. We were 90 people at the time, and I had just come out of the writing of my book, and everything I learned on that journey pretty much gave me the courage to fire myself
Mm-hmm.
and start the journey that I'm on now, which is courageous. I'd say the last 5 years I've been in this world, and this world is partially courageous leadership, partially courageous ideas, which is the world I came from, and partially courageous reinvention, which is helping companies that are stuck,
Mm-hmm.
that are scared, that are stale, or that are safe. And you think about what you need to shift and to pivot. It's utilizing what I learned on my 1,000-day journey writing Return on Courage. There's a framework that came out of that. And again, in the spirit of story, it started with me. Like, everything I learned basically was like, wow, how can I write a book about courage and stay in my last life? And everything I had learned pretty much was like, it's time for me to go.
Mm-hmm.
Not an easy decision, right? Like not an easy
Right.
moment.
Yeah.
Um, eh, Obviously, I could talk about this, or you tell me when to get out of the way. But like Angie, have you ever had that feeling like you're in the office that you thought you wanted? And I had hired well. We were like again, we were about 90 people, so I had hired well. We had I had two people that were direct reports, but they were talented, and I had done my job to get out of the way. And so here I am. I'm like, is this how I'm supposed to feel?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I felt slightly off and I was like, I don't think this is it. So when I go on the book writing journey, and again, I at the time I think I'm writing the book because the premise of my last creative agency is courageous ideas are the only ones that matter. I think it's like a devious attempt to position that last business, right? And as I meet with all these different leaders, it becomes apparently clear that the universe has a different plan for me. Each of them is like a sage wizard mentor master that I need to meet with a lesson that I need to hear. And and from there it was pretty much like as I started to learn, well, you can teach companies or leaders how to be courageous.
Mm-hmm.
I of course had to start with myself in my own company.
Isn't it funny how that happens? You try to teach
Thank you.
something to someone and it comes right back, doesn't it?
And again, it was I could lie to myself
Mm-hmm.
about it, or I could at least address it head on. And so I'd say from 2015 to 2017 was the 1,000 Day March.
Mm-hmm.
I called it interviewing the brave, the bullish, and the brainiac.
Mm-hmm.
Had the opportunity to sit with some amazing people. They weren't clients. I wasn't paying them. There was just something about the topic of courage that resonated with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me to, let's see here. Now the CEO of Domino's, Russell Wallach. I met with, Russell Weiner. I also met with the president of Live Nation, Russell Wallach. Get those names mixed up all
Mm-hmm.
the time. Eric Ryan, founder of Method Soap. And they're like, yeah, come up and have lunch with me. Astronauts, Navy SEALs, tornado chasers, firefighters,
I can't wait to read the
NY.
book.
Yeah, it was just
Yeah.
like an awesome.
Yeah.
It's almost like an unfair journey.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting with a Navy SEALs. Jeff Boss is one that comes to mind, and you're like, why do you do what you do? How
Mm-hmm.
do you do what you do? You know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
What's the process like? Jeff said that Navy SEAL training. I think these were the words he used. They called it stress inoculation. Boy, that sounds like marketing if I've ever heard of.
Stressing out.
What he really, right? What he really meant was they're going to make sure that they've seen everything before they see live rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So they're managing your stress
Mm-hmm.
before you ever go into that situation. That reminded me, I interviewed a woman that was a bank teller who was robbed at gunpoint. This is another story that's in the book. She wasn't like if I like had a crystal ball like, hey, you're gonna get robbed if you take this job.
Mm-hmm.
You think she takes the job?
Not most likely not. Right.
Probably not, right?
Yeah.
But so she had to pass the training modules
Mm-hmm.
in order to get the job, and then when she gets robbed, the I remember she said the robber said, "Don't turn this into a homicide," and the training took over. She almost went into autopilot, and she followed it to a T. So you've got two people, a Navy SEAL who consciously, willingly knows what's coming,
Mm-hmm.
and he's trained for that moment. And you've got a bank teller who hopes she never needs to use the training, and
Mm-hmm.
then it kicks in. And I think that was the aha moment. Like whether you opt in or not, it's the training
Mm-hmm.
that's needed. So if you could train people to be courageous, if you could hold their hand and give them the actual tools step by step, maybe that is the difference. And so that was like one of the little moments that was like a data point that I was on the right path. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now how do you train them and what are the actual steps? And I don't want to give the book away, but like that's what's really in the book is the framework, and it takes you through the differences between a careless move and a courageous move. I believe it also takes you through the differences between a resilient move and a courageous move. I think resilience and courage are close. We'll call them cousins, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not the same thing. I think you don't get a say on change, and it's happening whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But resilience is when change is happening to you and how you respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
And courage is when you're driving change. So one is change drives you. That's resilient. None of us said, "Hey, I'm in on COVID," right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it happened to us, and it was how we responded to that. And but when you hit the gas and you're proactive and you're driving change, I think that's an act of courage. And that's really the business that I'm in is helping leaders and companies get clear on what matters the most so they can figure out their narrative and drive that narrative inside their organization first and then take it to the outside world.
Absolutely. So when I read your blog, that's how I came to know you. You wrote a blog for MEA, and there was a couple of things that really stood out to me that resonated with me. And the blog was, I can't remember the name of the blog, but there was a couple of things. It was you were talking about survival mode, success mode, and soul mode, right? And you talk about creating an environment for people, to thrive in and to start that. And you talk about living in purpose, making sure that they're living in their purpose, and that courage is regret insurance. And there were so many things in that article or in that blog that just resonated with me. I work with a lot of leaders, lots of executives, and even all throughout the organization. And one of the things that I see consistently is fear of making a mistake, fear of not being liked, fear of making the wrong decision. You name it, fear, 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 fear. And we live in a very fear-based society. I think that's one of the biggest problems that we're facing is just living in fear and being paralyzed by it. And so I love that you've talked about it being a skill set because I absolutely think it is a skill set that you can learn like anything else. But it's kind of like where we've got to practice it, right? So I really love the blog that you put on the MEA Wisdom Well, and I really just attracted me to what you're doing to get to your website, to read some of your blogs, to now I want to read your book. I just haven't had the time because it's all went so fast.
What have you been doing? I mean, you haven't read the
It's
book
been like
yet? I
two
mean,
days since I talked to you, and I've
yeah,
so I'll get to it.
yeah.
Maybe over Thanksgiving. What we
I mean,
believe. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I feel like a lot of people early in their career, you don't have a lot of say. You don't really get a nobody asks you, right? You don't really get to design the life perfectly the way you want to live it. Go back to that television radio version of me. And I remember back then just being like, I will do that for money. Yeah, I'm in. You want to pay me to be in advertising? And I didn't get I didn't get my first choice. I got a job as a writer on the business development team, and I wanted to be a creative. But it was like it's like getting into the college you want, but not getting your major.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cool, I'm in. Now I got to work my way into that group. But like, I had to just basically survive that. I didn't get to say who my boss was. I really had no idea how to negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to pick my peers. So you go through that first decade, maybe it's 5 years, 10 years, could be 15 years of what I would call survival
Mm-hmm.
mode. And you're just learning a lot and you're just trying not to drown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you run into that, you learn what to do by watching what not to do years.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in the survival years. And you're like, oh man, I'm never going to be like that boss.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Greatest
Or
teachers.
wow, I'm never going to say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And over that same period of time, you probably run into no less than a handful of people that you're like really impressed by.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, wow, like I need to stay in touch with that person. I want to stay connected. Our logics match up.
Mm-hmm.
And as the world sort of slows down for you and you start to understand how the operation works and you start to get some wins, you slip into what I call success mode. And success mode is like you kind of know who not to work for, you know who to matador,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this could be 5 years, 10 years, another 15 years of working. And it's really the opportunity where things slow down. You've earned your reputation. You're probably monetizing that opportunity. And there becomes a time a little later where you start to get a little numb because
Mm-hmm.
you've been doing the same thing over and over again. And maybe it's been self-serving. That's okay. Self-serving is, hey, you got a family. You want to put somebody through college or you want to
Mm-hmm.
save for a 401k. And I think that next wave is what I call soul mode. And it's really what you talked about with purpose. And I can already tell you if someone's listening to this podcast, they already care about purpose because you care about purpose. But okay, let's say there's you don't care about purpose yet. Maybe it's not time for you to care about purpose. You're still in survival mode. It's too far away,
Mm-hmm.
or you're in success mode and you're chopping wood and you're collecting, revenue or money for all the things.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you get to a point where it slows down and it's more than money. And it's like, what's my impact? What am I going to give back?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel about courageous. If I learned anything from marketing and story, what I learned is you can't be all things to all people,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you try to stand for everyone, you stand for no one. And what happens a lot in life is we actually figure out that little moment, that little sliver of what we should be known for, but we don't want to offend anybody. So we stay too wide on our aperture.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned is like, no, in marketing, it's like pick a lane. This is now the fourth business I've started. I finally got the name right, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, what I love most about Courageous is it tells the world who we're not for as much as who we are for. And so I don't get calls from certain people that it would be a waste of time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Like, good. Like, we're here for a very short period of time. I'm sure as you think about the work that you're doing, the energy you get when you have willing customers that love the work that you do, it's versus you having to convince somebody
Mm.
that
Yeah.
they need it.
Well,
That's
that
exhausting.
it does, and that actually goes back to our motto, which is work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. And so, as I think about that, how do you align with that, with what you're doing?
Well, I mean, just couldn't be more aligned. Again, we're trying to do everything possible to vet qualified leads. So,
Mm-hmm.
I've got all sorts of ways. Like, think about this, right? The MEA blog
Mm-hmm.
that landed with you, right? That's an opt-in.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got Return on Courage as a book. So, hey, read the book. If you like the book, let's talk. If you don't like the book, that's cool. I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
the guy for you or not the company for you. It doesn't hurt my feelings.
Right.
It's there's no fear there for me, right? It's not personal. Now with a lot of our clients, I've been saying, fear fighting since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
We're corporate fear fighters. Like that is the business that we're in. We're in the fear shrinkage business, right? Where is the fear? How do we attack the fear and address it? And as to the listener, think about some place in your business right now where you've suppressed a fear. You just don't even want to deal. Like you don't even realize you're doing it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're like, hey, let's address the fear versus suppress the fear.
Name
And
it
what
and
I
tame
want
it.
is say it again.
Name it and tame it.
I love that. Name it
Yeah.
and tame it, right?
Yep.
So yeah, we say state it and create it. That's how,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
we're singing the same song here.
Yeah.
And to your point on energy, I always say there's three types of people in the world: people that drain your energy, people that you gain energy from, and then their third, I think, is maintain energy. They maintain your energy. I'm not sure maintain energy is a great place either. It's sort of neutral. Drain energy, cut them.
Vampires.
Gain energy,
Yeah.
bring them in,
Yeah.
as fast as possible. So
Yeah.
we're very aligned on those on that world.
Yeah, so a lot of people that listen to our podcast are like in the trenches. They're working every day. They're doing their best. I would say that most of them might not even know or be self-aware enough to know that they know they have these icky feelings, but they don't know how to name them or to recognize or to even admit. They haven't gotten to the space of being vulnerable yet. And one of our tenets at Black River is that vulnerability does not equal weakness. It actually is our greatest measure of courage. And that is something that I'd like to have you address, because there had to be some time in your career. For me, I was working in the operating room, and I was just looking around at people and watching stuff and thinking, people don't even understand how their behaviors are impacting people. They don't understand what they just said. They don't understand, this surgeon doesn't understand that they just made everybody in the room afraid of them. And now nobody's going to speak up, and that's going to put their patient at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a awareness problem, right? This is a self-awareness hiccup. Um, I think this is a you don't have to do this alone problem. I do this exercise in many of my keynotes where I talk about the cockroach, right? This thing that could survive a nuclear holocaust. And there's like these three insights that you could take away from La Cucaracha. The first is, in Latin, cockroach is blada, which means into the darkness. And we as humans like to stay in the light. We don't like the darkness. We like to stay where it's nice and safe. The second insight, and you kind of know this, you can see the image even though we don't have to show it, right? Which is, well, when you see one La Cucaracha, they're rarely by themselves, right? You see one, and you can imagine the slide, right? You see many, and these are gregarious little creatures that enjoy being together. Now, when we finally choose to go to the darkness, usually we go by ourselves. We go down there by like alone, and we're afraid. And so I can imagine that operating room team that's not they're more a group than a team, especially if they're not playing like a team. They don't feel like they're all going there alone because the energy's been sucked out of the room. And so, again, the cockroach not afraid to go to the darkness. When they go down there, they go down together. And three, there's a study done that if you chopped off a cockroach's head, I know you're like, where is Ryan going with this? It could actually live for up to 30 days.
Wow.
Now, I don't know what its purpose would be. This is one of the worst studies on the planet. Like, somebody actually sat there, was like 27 days, 28 days, 29 days. But how often have we gotten stuck in our own heads? You know exactly the right move to make, and we can never get out of our own heads. We're stuck there, and versus getting into our guts, into our hearts, into our intuition. So I often will start a keynote or a workshop talking about, okay, by the end of today, it's about acknowledging that we're going to go into the darkness. You don't have to go alone. Look around. You're going to make some friends. You're going to make some relationships. And then how do you get out of that paralysis of your head into your intuition, into your gut, into your heart, and trust that, because that's still connected to your brain, and it is still rooted on experience. And I think all of this, if I'm the listener right now, is a very long-winded way of saying, stop trying to do this by yourself.
Hmm. Ask for help.
You didn't learn, that's for help. You didn't learn to drive by yourself. There was somebody that you had to go and pass the test before
Hmm.
you jumped into that world. And so I think it's just that. I think it's just surround yourself with your tribe, your raft mates,
Hmm.
and don't be afraid to experiment in that space.
I completely agree that asking for help is an act of courage. It's a vulnerable space, but it is so important. And most people, I would say and argue that they want to help.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're back to the soul, right? To
Hmm.
the soul component. And I think the more time we've been on this planet and the slower the world gets, even though we have less time, I think the more we want to help and we want to share.
Hmm.
So we want to share what we've learned. And again, the world's moving forward and
Hmm.
we all have to keep learning and growing. But that is the beautiful thing about mentorship, in my opinion.
I love it. I love the mentorship, the chip. What does he call it? The mentorship, something like that. So, as as you've been on this path, what what is one of the things that has scared you the most, or you've been most afraid of, and you've done it anyway?
I mean, leaving my last life, leaving agency life by far, because basically from 1998 to 2000 and gosh, let's hear 2015. I was in the advertising world. That was my world. Even when I was in a leadership position, I still felt like that was my arena. And your identity is wrapped up in that,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're like, this is what I am. This is what the community knows me as. Or in my head, that's what I assumed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I have this image of me sitting in that office, just sort of going, "Is this it? Is this how I'm supposed to feel?"
Mm-hmm.
So I was more mad a year before I actually left. I wasn't mad at anybody other than my like myself, that I had put myself in that spot. And I don't think I did anything wrong. I wouldn't change like a day of my past experiences, but I knew the scary part was coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like I had made the decision there's going to be a lot of change in front of me. And, it's funny because that was a conscious moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I look back at a lot of the decisions that I made and I was maybe more, I didn't have the awareness that I was being courageous.
Mm-hmm.
Moving to New York City at 22 where nobody, you're just going on the adventure,
Right.
right? Or even, look, at the age of 8, I was on an airplane flying 2 states away because I wanted to go to this month-long summer camp. That was exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I've always been up for the adventure, but I think a lot of it didn't feel like courage, or some other to me. So I think other people would see that as they'd be scared. And there's a statistic that 50% of the U.S. population lives 50 miles from where they're born.
Wow.
I mean, the apple really doesn't fall far from the tree. You got 170 million people that live 50 miles from where they were born. And look, that doesn't mean that group is not courageous, right?
Mm-hmm.
All it means is for some reason we like the familiar, and that was never me. Like
Mm-hmm.
even with my wife now, if you poll the two of us of what we want for our kids, I have a sneaking suspicion she's like, oh, wherever the kids live is where we'll live. And I'm like, oh, no, like go on an adventure, report back,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
that's where
Yes.
we're different, right? Like
Yeah.
get out of
Absolutely.
here,
Yeah.
go see
Fly
some
the
stuff,
nest. Yes. Fly
fly,
away
yeah, zoo, get out of here.
and then come back. Like go. Yeah. Report back. I agree. Um, I love that analogy. So as you've been working with leaders, what are some examples, or how do you really start to infuse courage, or train it, or what did you call it? Diminish fear, or what do you call it?
Fear shrinkage. How
Fear
do we shrink
shrinkage.
fear?
How do we shrink fear?
Well, I'd say the first thing, and I do think it's an act of vulnerability, although I have a gripe with the word vulnerability, but it's nothing catastrophic and we can get there if you want to go there. But look, I think people underestimate the reality of we're all mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
Like I believe that you are what you speak. If you speak cruelly, that's what you're going to get back. If you speak kindly, that's what you're going to get back. If you praise somebody, that's what you're going to get back. If you can call out your messy flaws, that's going to give them permission to do the same. I didn't say the word courage yet, right? Like I'm just talking about some of the basics
Mm-hmm.
for anyone on communication. And I think it's a very lonely place to be the leader.
Mm-hmm.
You've worked your whole career off to get there, and one minute you're a peer with somebody in a closed door meeting, and the next moment you're their boss, or you start a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got this belief system, and now you're afraid you may or may not be getting the truth, or you
Mm-hmm.
wonder why. To your point, the team isn't communicating back the way they used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it starts by acknowledging, if I'm a mirror, where do I need to be vulnerable? Hey, I don't have the answer on this.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be messy. This is going to be an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I'm dealing with, or navigating some of my clients, I said dealing with some of their messy. I think it's just being their friend. It's like I think friend gets a bad rap in corporate. It's like a different four-letter F word
Mm-hmm.
now, and to me, like that's what I feel like. That's what they need is a friend who's going to listen, who's going to give it to them straight, who
Mm-hmm.
can provide counsel. It's tough love. It's not tough by itself. It's tough love. I should probably also share that the first 6 months of writing Return on Courage, I spent most of my time sort of sparring with three questions. The first was, are they going to see me as a fraud? Because I've never written a book before,
Right.
which was my own fears,
Yeah. Imposter syndrome stuff, right?
my own stuff.
Yeah.
I've never written a book before. How do you do that? Don't ask the astronaut a stupid question, right? Like you can see that one. The second was, do businesses even think they need this? Is courage even on the radar? The idea space is a tricky one because in some ways, time doesn't stop and you're throwing ideas into the future. And your job is to try to land an idea just before society is ready. Too much, it's too much. Too late, you miss the boat.
Yep.
So it's a timing game. And so I'm looking at this concept of courage, going, do people really think they need it? Do they? And what I learned was a whole slew of people are just trying to get through the weeds of email.
Mm-hmm.
Public companies are just trying to get to the next quarterly review. Everyone's just trying to matador getting fired. Politics of businesses are real. And I had to really stay in it to go, is this something that they need and that I could even monetize,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm honest,
Mm-hmm.
down the line? And then the other question I asked was, when you look at the dictionary definition of courage, which is the ability to do something that frightens you, um, how could that be the definition? Like, who wants to do that in life, let alone at work? And right, like, please step forward. I'm taking a step back on that. So I was curious on if I could come up with a better definition of courage. And, who am I to judge the dictionary, right? Mr. Webster, Mr. Oxford, like, really, I'm going to go there. So I came out the other side, I'd say it was about 6 months in. And my definition of courage is knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage. And, you think about a challenge at work, and we do the very best we can to aggregate knowledge, right? And I think people never feel comfortable that they have enough knowledge.
For sure.
So that's where the data comes into play. They keep collecting and keep collecting, and
Yeah. Analysis
I think if
paralysis. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
We never leap. And so, how much knowledge do you need that builds the faith metric? And when we talk about faith, we mean it less in the religious sense and more in the belief sense and the intuition sense and the conviction sense. And more times than not, people know the right move and they feel the right move and they never leap, they never jump. And so, ironically, 2 of 3 levers in any direction is something else. Knowledge and faith without action is paralysis. Faith and action without knowledge is a reckless move. And knowledge and action without faith, if you're numb on the inside and you're going through the motions, and we know many people who've been at companies for 20 years and they're just sort of going through the motions, they're working on status quo. They're working on safe. And hey, nothing wrong with that. That's just not courageous. That's not my business. That's not my target audience. So everything we do in our business, phase 1 is knowledge gathering. Phase 2 is faith building. Phase 3 is action taking. Right? The knowledge gathering is the think. The faith building is the feel. And the action taking is the do. So even my partners, one runs the knowledge team, I run the faith team, my third runs the action team. We say we're special forces. That helps you figure out you're special. So to me, we're looking at these levers as we go in and go, oh, this is a knowledge problem, or this is a faith problem, or this is whatever the problem might be.
Right.
And so I think when you have that definition, now it keeps you honest. Like, what do I think about this? How do I feel about this? What are we going to do about this? And we're trying to implement that with our leaders and our clients so they can stay courageous as they move forward.
Yeah, demystifies it for them, right? Just gives them a framework and a tool set, right, for the journey.
I mean, again, everybody needs an ally. Everybody needs a
Right.
friend. So yes, to me, it's the framework, it's the words, it's the tools, and it's the confidence to lead courageously and to be courageous.
Would you say courage is a value?
I would say courage can be a value. I think it depends on the company. We have a whole. I mean, we would need another hour show on values, but I think if you pull the Ryan Berman string, you'll hear me say, how valuable are your values? Right? I mean, core values are not eye rolls, they're how the exceptional roll. And not only do I think almost every business on the planet needs to revisit their values and make sure that they're modern, make sure that they're driving the behavior that you want. But I would say that almost every leader should look at their personal values. And I would say less than 1% can rattle off their own values. To me, optimism is my number one value. I mean, how much time have we spent together, right? But is this a surprise that I'm a glass half full guy and I want to help, right? And I see the world through that lens. Creativity is my number 2 value. Courage is my number 3 value, and excellence is my number 4 value. almost everyone I spend time with sort of dances with 1 to 4 of those values because that's where I gain energy, right?
Yep.
That's where
Mm-hmm.
we're in alignment with who I am.
Right.
And so a lot of the times with leaders, we're helping them figure out who they are.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends, Colette Carson, she's takes a lot of stages. She says, clarity is a rarity. So good.
Yeah, that is good.
So good. And so I agree. A lot of our work is helping leaders get clear on who they are and then designing the life from there versus responding to
Mm-hmm.
every house fire or every
Mm-hmm.
email. It's like, let's take it to it, not the other way around.
And I do see it goes throughout the organization that if the leaders aren't clear on their values or they're not living out their values and these are just posters on the wall, that I see that far too often. You have to have lived values, not just posters on the wall, right? And courage, I know that's one that I align on you with because it resonates within my soul as into who I am. And I'm the one that will speak up. I'm the one that will say something. I'm the one that will do something, even if it scares me. I'm no Mother Teresa, but I'll do it anyway, right? And I know for a fact that when I'm repelled by somebody, it's somebody I don't jive with them when they won't speak their mind. They won't say something. They're too afraid. And I want to help them, but it's something that they have to want for themselves, right? Or they have to be aware of it. And so, and I really think a lot of it actually comes down to self awareness. I really don't think they see that you can see that they're not being courageous or they're not taking a stand or they're not standing for anything.
Well, again, we're back to the how do you help people be the best version of themselves, but they have to want to be helped,
Right.
right? Some patients aren't ready to be operated on,
For sure. For sure. Right.
right? So I definitely have said, if you don't know what you stand for, you never know when to take a stand.
Mm-hmm.
And I look, there's been moments in my life with certain people that it's just a broken record syndrome the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, every time we get together, it's like every few months and we're still in the same issue, but there's no leap,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just paralysis, and that's okay, right? Like if I can't help this person, then I need to move on too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can't want it more
And
than you do.
so
Right.
that's the idea. It's again, I'm trying to. I mean, as audacious as it is, like I want to find just if I can inspire 1% of the U.S. population, 3.4 million, right, to be more courageous, to
Mm-hmm.
give them the tools, right? I think the world definitely needs more courage, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
anything that we like, it was an act of courage at some point.
Right.
And so if I could get to that 1%, let them do the rest. Let them do the next layer of the
Absolutely.
Kevin Bacon game, right? Give
Yes.
them the tools, and
Yeah.
they can inspire somebody else. And so I think that's one thing. And then from an awareness standpoint, you should also know I'm not a carpe diem guy. I'm more of a decennium carpe guy, which is seize the decade. And you know, some people like Tony Robbins, some people aren't that big of a fan. I I was at I'm Not Your Guru on opening night in Austin. I had to be there. I was still in my ad world, and there was something that was driving me there that I was interested in, and I remember studying him. And he said something on the stage that night. He said that we overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can do in 10.
Mm.
And I love what that did for me. It gave me permission and grace to like not have it all figured out, but I had enough clarity to know
Right.
where I was going. I knew what my North Star was, I knew what my lighthouse was, and now it was all right, how do I get there? I think that's the big challenge for everybody is like, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
What's the mark you want to leave? And then what's holding you back from doing that?
Yeah, so do you do some visualization techniques or anything? So like say you're going to do a keynote or you're going to interview some big wig on the podcast or something, like you get nervous or you start kind of visualizing yourself being courageous or, posturing, or what are some for our listeners that they want to practice it and they want to just put it into action. I think like some of the times I use visualization techniques. Do you ever do that?
Yeah, I do. And I get really laser focused. So I'm good at blocking out everything and just sort of thinking through. Imagine, because I have my podcast too, right? So the
Mm,
Courageous Podcast, and I'll give you the act, but then I'll kind of give it to you, like I'll give you the show and then the tell, right? So the
okay.
show is it's a chessboard. What are my first 4 to 6 moves that I think I'm going to make? And I acknowledge that depending on the move that the guest makes, that might pivot me into a different move.
Mm-hmm.
That's the show. The tell is I believe that I'm hyper aware what matters most in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm extremely prepared for the stresses and speed of life and business. And so this is all code for how prepared are you really for that next move, for hitting the gas. And again, my rite of passage was writing my book. So yes, it can come off as a shameless promotion saying go pick up Return on Courage. The back half of the book is there's working exercises that you can run yourself through. It's going to give you the clarity you need to understand where you should go or where your business should go. But when you're in it and the book was not a soapbox book. It was a documentary. And so as I got answers, I moved on to the next, moved on to the next. And I remember telling myself, and remember at the time I had 2 business partners who were not happy with me because they're like, where's the book? Where's the book? Let's get the book out there. Here's this business development tool. And in some ways I had the courage to go, it's not ready yet. Right? Like I want to make sure it's my name that's on the book, by the way. I don't want to put a shitty product out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to last a lot longer than me.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I had a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I knew at some point they'd be old enough to read the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure I was giving them a playbook that if they wanted to follow, they could on how to live a courageous life and be a courageous leader.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's just that. It's like the muscle we're back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's the muscle. You go to the mental gym and, again, every day I think about knowledge, faith, and action. I think about, well, which knowledge should I follow? How do you build faith? Where do you take action? I have this label on my phone when my alarm goes off that says transfer the light.
Mm.
Like I think leaders are sometimes when you feel lonely, you're in the dark. And my job is to be the energy and to be the light and to listen, but then to share how can I help unlock this leader so they can be the best leader that they can be, even when they can't even see it yet.
Right. Yeah.
That's winning, in my opinion.
Absolutely. You're giving them the tools, you're giving them the confidence, you're giving them the support, challenge and support. And you're right, like it's one of those things that it is a very rewarding experience to be able to help move somebody along in ways that none of us could do alone, to be honest.
Well, I mean, I wish that I had. I don't know if I was just too stubborn. I wish I would have had a coach or a mentor early.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was 38, 39 that I finally found somebody that saw something in me that I hadn't even seen yet.
Yeah.
And that was a guy named Steve Wilhite. Steve, it's a great story. Steve was hired by Steve Jobs at Apple, but he basically was running the Volkswagen business out of Boston, and he's skiing in Whistler with his buddies when he gets the call from Apple that Jobs wants to meet him. And when you're on vacation and Steve Jobs calls, your vacation is over. And so he ends up zipping down, and he's in the lobby, and you can imagine he looks like a skier, so he's like he hasn't shaved, he's got nothing with him, and the way Steve Wilhite tells the story, he's like, Steve Jobs himself comes out and gets me, and is like, Wilhite, it's great to meet you. That thing you did with VW, how did you do that? How'd you pull that off? And Wilhite starts to explain, like, here's what happened, here's how we did it, and he's like no more than 20 seconds in, and Jobs cuts him off. He's like, no way. You're full of shit, Wilhite. There's no way that's what happened. Here's why that couldn't happen. Yada, 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 whatever he says, right? And the first thing Wilhite's thinking is he's getting ripped into by Jobs. Like, boy, I'm so glad I left my vacation for this. And for the next 30 minutes, this is how the conversation went. Jobs would ask Wilhite a question. Wilhite would start to answer it, and Jobs would contest the truth of what happened. He's like, no way that's not how it happened. And they went back and forth for 30 minutes. He's like, this is a complete waste of time. And in the spirit of the interview, Jobs passes Wilhite on to the next person, and he continues through his half day of interviews. And I think he says he's on the last interview of the day. And Jobs comes in and cuts that interview short, grabs Wilhite. They're walking down the hallway, and he says to Wilhite, Steve, you're going to be the best hire we ever made here at Apple. And Wilhite was like, baffled by this. And then later realized, well, why did Jobs do that? The last thing Steve Jobs needed was another yes man. He didn't have a lot of time to figure out if you were going to stand up for your idea or not. So this was the mechanism he did to get to, who is this human? Is he going to stand up for his idea?
That's
Or is
incredible.
he going to fold like a lawn chair?
Oh, man, that's
And,
incredible.
So when I met Wilhite years later, obviously he was living in San Diego, and he saw my competitiveness to like build something real in fish taco land. We hit it off, and he became a mentor. But I wish, maybe that's a good place to land or end. Have the courage to call out a mentor.
Yes.
Have the courage to hire a coach. Angie, I have a coaching program that I don't sell on the website. Like a lot of the way you look at our websites, I'm a keynote speaker, it's a workshop, it's an offsite, or we're in the consulting practice and we're rolling up our sleeves with the client and we're helping them figure out an idea or their tomorrow. And I don't even like saying coaching program personally. But when I think of the very best coaches, when I think of Coach K, when I think of like Tom Izzo, I'm going straight to college basketball. The idea of getting the most out of a player and a team, there's joy there. That is where I get energy. And so I'm sure you feel the same way about your business. Like, as long as I can stay in the courageous space, and I basically get paid to tell the truth,
Yeah.
right? I'm down for that. I'm in.
I'm down for it too. I love it. And I wish I would have gotten a coach earlier. What would you say to your 20-year-old self?
Am I me today talking to that 20-year-old self?
Yeah.
I would say that you're on the right path. Enjoy the ride, and keep your eyes and ears open, and you're gonna be just fine. I'd start there. And I'm like, and there will be stubborn moments that you have decisions to make. Just know you're down the line, you're gonna be just fine. Continue to trust your intuition. There's not much more I would share because I wouldn't want to ruin the journey for a 20-year-old version of myself.
Right?
And and I think that says if I really look back at it all, there's not a lot of days I would change.
Hmm. Thinking about those little kiddos, and you write in the book about it and wanting it to be a message for them. What do you want them to know about being courageous and what that 1%, what is the biggest message that you just really want to create that wave? And fill us in really before we end on your courageous week and your courageous corporate courage movement.
Okay, so there's a lot there. I would say just I'll start with the end, and we'll go to my kids. So the two things I'm most excited about. One is called Courageous Summits, and I think what we think we know, because you never know, but what we think we know is that it's an absurd time right now for almost every business.
Mm-hmm.
We have this remote work thing, and it in my opinion, it is the real losers are innovation and the next generation. And the next generation doesn't even know it because this is all they've ever known. So like they're like, this is amazing. I don't have to go into work. I save 3 hours on my commute. I'm productive. And they're missing that in the collisions, it's like in the cartilage of the business. In those little moments is where you find your mentors. It's in those, Angie, it was like someone would come to my office and say, "Do you have a minute?" And you're like, "Oh shit!" Like, "Oh, this is gonna be an hour-long conversation, right?" And
Right?
hey, Ryan, do you have a minute? And as much as I would cringe at first, it's like actually in that collision, what came out of that could take 40 minutes
Mm-hmm.
was a gem.
Right.
That was the multiplier. And now your calendar is like 30-minute block, 30-minute block, 30-minute block, 30-minute block. I got to go to the next Zoom. I got to go to the next Teams. And all those collisions aren't happening. And so I think our team realizes it's really hard to make remote work emote work, which is
Mm-hmm.
what it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so Courageous Summits is our way of partnering with companies to design 2.5 to 3 day offsites.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the Goldilocks thing. It's like even the offsite that's been planned,
Mm-hmm.
when it's not perfectly curated, is wow, did you really fly everybody in just to talk at them for 3 days? Or it's the other. It's like, well, that was inspirational. There was a lot of fluff. We were on the golf course for a day. The bar tab was high,
Mm-hmm.
and like there was nothing on the business objectives. And so I think there's a Goldilocks just right. And knowing we have our think, feel, do methodology, we have a knowledge day, which is the what.
Mm-hmm.
We have a faith day, which is the so what. And we have an action day, which is the now what. And we're building these 3 day journeys for our companies. We've taken Kraft Heinz through this. Another company in Michigan, Spartan Ash, we've now done 2 of these for. So we're getting more confidence with this product.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is just like all sites are off. They're just off. Cultures are broken, and people are craving connection. They want
Mm-hmm.
real FaceTime, not
Yep.
Apple's FaceTime.
Yeah. Loneliness is at its all-time high. 1 out of 2 people are lonely, and it affects our health. It's just we need something like
So,
that.
so that's the idea. The idea is Courageous Summits is we're basically launching this product where we'll work with the leader on designing what those 3 days look like,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll hopefully get to real breakout breakthroughs that we'll announce in the room on day 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taking courage, it's taking hard conversations, it's it's taking clarity, and it's taking connection, and it's bringing it all into one arena. So that's one. Courage Week is going to always be when September 6th is. I'll spare you the details as to why, but so inspired by what Chip has done down at MEA, and the more I meet courageous leaders like yourself, the more you want to connect that community. So the idea is to run a 3-day event called Courage Week, Knowledge Day, Faith Day, Action Day. And that's not designed for like you and your 400 peers or your 200 peers of work. It's like, hey, here are people that are leaders that are dealing with the same shit that you are. Get to know them. Let's build that tribe. You know, you and I both. By the way, I loved your lion. I loved your lion.
Thank
Gotta
you.
say that it was so cool.
Thank you.
So you know, I mean, you can clearly see that I have my lion. So the whole idea is lions lead together,
We're a pack.
right? Like we're a pack. It's that simple.
Yep.
So
Yep.
day one is lions think together. Day two is lions feel together. Day three is lions do together, and that's the idea. So that's coming to, and we're trying to figure out how to do that the right way in year one. And I'm back to that Tony Robbins, right? It's what does this community look like 10 years from now? And then, so those are the two main focuses for the consultancy. For my kids, I mean, I think the layman answer is that just not just talking about courage, but doing and being courageous. When you come out the other side, you're almost always happier. And it's a muscle. So the more you do it, not that it's easy, but the easier it is to at least do it again and again and again. And so, you know, I mean, I want them to go live that courageous adventure, and I'm here to remind them that the good news is when you're in a room of 100 people, know that 95 of them have no interest in leaping. That's what the data said. You know, like, freezer flight is real. Right? So the fact that, Angie, we're connected, we're part of the 5 that aren't afraid to like do it anyway and experiment and see what happens. And so the same thing as they grow up, it starts just as simple like go live an adventure, be courageous. You know, I've got my little courage bracelet here. They each wear one of these that they're in their school, and I'm like, when you need to be courageous, snap it, and you can feel it,
Yeah.
and it'll make you happier for doing that. And down the line, we'll be like, hey, this is an advantage. Actually, this is a competitive advantage. If only 5 of you are going to leap, be one of those 5. Don't be
Absolutely.
afraid to be one of those 5.
I think about our listeners right now and hearing what you're saying and thinking about just even me doing a podcast was scary for me. It's not something I've ever done before. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I've just been doing it anyways. But it's one of those things where I didn't know how I left higher education. Like the safety net, right? Like I worked in the operating room, then I taught teaching students how to work in the operating room. Those were safe things for me. Being an entrepreneur is not safe. It's scary, but it's like it's worth the journey. It's worth it. I really, you read The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink, you really can, you start to look at the world regret surveys and what people really regret. It's not the things, it's not the leaps they take. It's the things they didn't do that they regret the most. And so as you're all listening to this, I want you to think about, it's okay to be scared. It's a matter of just doing the thing anyway. And I hope that today that you got some nuggets and some gems on ways to do it. I mean, it could be wearing a bracelet and snapping it. It could be practicing it, exposure therapy, doing more things that you're scared of, increasing your uncertainty tolerance. We've talked about so many of the things, but it is a muscle. It is, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Even asking you to speak, to be on the podcast. I didn't know if you'd respond or anything, but the answer is always no if you don't ask. If you don't ask for help, if you don't ask for mentorship, if you don't pay some money for a coach, if you don't get your team the training they need, the answer is always no, right? Like, get out there and do the thing. Take the leap.
Take the leap. Even if it's funny, I got my weekly dose of courage newsletter that goes out every Thursday, and This week is titled Loss is More.
Loss is more?
Not less is more, loss is more.
Oh.
And it looks at a particular moment in my life where we lost. We came in second, the dreaded second place.
First loser.
And first loser, baby. And then how do I tell my team that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and how to address that? And I had a friend of mine who used to say those who come in second eventually come in first.
Mm.
Right? And there's a quote, I think it's George Moore said, a winner is just a loser who tried one more time.
Love that.
Right? So the problem is that most people don't even bring a bat to the plate. They don't even show up for the game. And then some finally take a cut and lose, and they stop there. Right? And really the lessons in the loss.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it makes winning more meaningful when you've lost, frankly. I'll take the wins now.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll take but I acknowledge the power of what's the lesson from the loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how do you use that and apply that as you move forward?
So good. So good. I'm so grateful for your time. I hope that everybody that's listening gained just a little bit more courage, and that your courage movement is, just snowballing. And let me know how to be a part of it. Let me know how I can support you. And I just really appreciate you taking the time, jumping on here so quick, not knowing me from anyone, right? Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Leader You podcast. If you found this information valuable, please listen, like, and subscribe, and share with your network. I really appreciate it.
Angie Young's EQ course has been enlightening and eye-opening. I've really enjoyed Angie's unique perspective and her ability to put things in a way that I can use emotional intelligence on the day-to-day. The coursework has been educational and really enjoyable. I find myself looking forward to each coaching call and the coursework as it comes along. It's been very educational without being overwhelming. I've been able to utilize it in the day-to-day workplace as well as in my personal relationships, and I really, really enjoy being able to grow in the emotional intelligence space.